Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. I have no idea how this was allowed to go on for so long. The general public was completely unaware that there were basically no financial controls at the U.S. Treasury and inside the federal government. That is a scandal. Definitely people should be held accountable for that because this goes into the trillions of dollars. Whoever has authority inside the federal government, these career officials that we're supposed to have such reverence for, they've allowed this to go on, and it's been going on for a long time. 3 major categories. First, from the Epoch Times, Doge says it completed major cleanup of Social Security records, saying that around 12.3 million people aged 120 or older are marked as deceased. Previously, they were considered alive. Some of those people, not all, but some of those people were receiving benefits directly from Social Security. So that's unquestionable that those people are not real people who are alive getting money that they're entitled to. But 12.3 million people, that is a huge number of people. I understand that it's a lot more difficult to manage taking people off of a list than it is putting people onto a list. But someone ought to be doing it. We do have 3 million people working at the federal government. Someone's responsibility should be to do that. And of course, someone's responsibility is to do things like that. They're just not doing it. And not out of laziness. The only reason to do something like that is to allow these Social Security numbers to be used for nefarious purposes. I hate to accuse people, and I can't directly say, here's the evidence of this person doing that. That's inside of Doge. They have that. And they have referred some things to the Department of Justice. But I mean, come on, 12 million people? As Elon Musk has explained it, when people are marked alive and they have a Social Security number, they have access to all types of federal government programs as well as voting opportunities. And they have caught some people who should not be voting that have been voting. The second category from Newsweek, Doge deactivates over 500,000 credit cards. These are credit cards issued to federal government employees. We have approximately 3 million federal government employees. For those people's jobs, does everyone, literally like everyone, need a credit card? Because keep in mind, this isn't deactivating all the federal government employees' credit cards. This is just deactivating 500,000 of them. There are some explanations for this where you have additional credit cards available for certain specific purposes, and that can help in terms of tracking money. But at the same time, it also opens up an area where you have to have so much oversight to make sure there's no fraud going on that it's nearly impossible. Can you imagine if we were in business together and I said, hey, you know what? I'm just going to open up an extra 15 or 20 credit cards, never mind who they're to, and I'm just going to keep charging them up. I think you would say, hey, wait a minute. How are we going to reconcile all this? And also, why does one individual need an extra 15 or 20 credit cards? Is it because each credit card represents a separate billing account and then maybe those billing accounts can be thrown away or disappeared so that there isn't a trace of what's going on with those credit cards? Because according to Senator Joni Ernst, there's a lot of fraud going on in that federal spending. Coming from Breitbart, Senator Joni Ernst finds huge fraud, according to her, in the $60 billion of federal employee spending directly from federal government credit cards. They have charges at casinos, bars, and pay-per-view and UFC fights. I don't think UFC fights or pay-per-views or maybe spending in bars, especially not casinos, necessarily relates to people's specific job responsibilities. Sometimes you're in the field. You've got to fill up gas for your federal government truck or something. You've got to purchase a generator because you're doing something and it's for the federal government. Understandable, completely legitimate. You ought to have your own specific credit card assigned to that employee that has those needs. Do we really have those kinds of needs on this scale? It doesn't seem like it. And I have no problem with people going to a casino or a bar and having a good time, but I do have a problem with them charging it on a federal government credit card and then having to wait for some multi-billionaire to kind of wander into the federal government and say, hey, how come there are no accounting controls here? That's not a good system. And third, this has been a massive story, and there's been a lot more talk about this again recently. Money being spent from the federal treasury with no accountability in the trillions of dollars. From the New York Post, Doge discovers $4.7 trillion in treasury payments were missing a critical code, leaving traceability almost impossible for all of those payments. So where did those payments go? Who would allow a system like this? This would be like saying, okay, here's my checkbook. For some reason, I have trillions of dollars in this account. You could just keep spending out of this checkbook. And by the way, you don't even have to write what it's for. Just write blank or cash in the payment line. That's a pretty good opportunity to go crazy with money. And even if you trust people, there's a reason why you have to have some basic legitimate accounting controls. As Musk has explained a couple of times, if you did this with a public company, you would go to jail because you're not controlling how money is being spent. And you must do that. You must account for money being spent in the proper way as well. Even if there was no stealing going on, and come on, there's got to be something going on here. Just the fact of not properly accounting for how the money is being spent gets very close to being a crime. In terms of how much money are being spent, by the way, on these federal credit cards, it could be 40 billion. According to this article, it's 40 billion. According to the other article, it's 60 billion. Who even knows how much it is? How much of that is fraud? How much of that is people just giving themselves some kind of a cash bonus or buying it with a federal card instead of buying it with your own personal credit card when you're buying a refrigerator for the house or something like that? We don't know. The Doge people probably have some good idea. They may not be 100% correct, but they're probably at least 80% correct. I want to see more on this story. And as we know, Elon Musk is leaving Doge to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week working at his companies, focused on his companies. They need his attention right now. But he's got all of his people in place to continue Doge. It feels to me more like now that he's delegated all of this work, people know what to do. The momentum is built up. He's institutionalized Doge where he's got people throughout the government. They're fighting several lawsuits to take even further action, especially in auditing Social Security. We may see more things get done with Musk gone than with Musk there. From the Epoch Times, Doge says it completed major cleanup of Social Security records. The Department of Government Efficiency said in a statement that its staff have completed a major cleanup of Social Security records after it was discovered that more than 12 million people aged 120 or older are in the system. And they're in the system as alive. They can't be alive. What about the people from 100 to 119? They're still in the system. They're being careful to not get people out of the system because they could be alive. They might need their Social Security payment. Understandable, but they have to do a little bit more work on this. Quote, after 11 weeks, Social Security has finished this major cleanup initiative. According to Doge, who wrote this in a post on social media, adding that some 12.3 million people listed as being aged 120 or older and still alive, quote, have now been marked as deceased. But Doge added that some complex cases still remain, such as individuals with 2 or more different birth dates on file, which will be investigated in a follow-up effort. How do you get more than 2 birth dates on your file? I don't know. It doesn't sound legitimate. Also, we do have in the millions of federal workers working for the federal government. Aren't they responsible to make sure that the information they have is accurate and at least on its face is somewhat reasonable? Shouldn't somebody get fired over this? They actually have changed the leadership in this office, replacing the head, so at least that's some progress. The update comes as new Social Security Administrator Frank Bisignano told Fox Business earlier this week that Social Security's records were not very good, and that's the source of the fraud. Quote, the amount of people that were not alive, that did not show on the system was outstanding. Millions and millions. And that is a source of potential for fraud. Adding that the work that Doge did in the agency was 100% accurate in a bid to locate anything that could lead to fraud. That's because, according to Bisignano, an active Social Security number that is still alive in the system presents the opportunity for fraud. Established by President Donald Trump in January, Doge is tasked with finding what officials say are fraud, waste, and abuse, but its efforts have been blocked in several court cases, namely in the Social Security Administration. Can you even imagine how much fraud is going on in Social Security? It may be the bulk of the fraud going on at the federal government. If not, it certainly is in the tens of billions. It's got to be. Doge's recent announcement on its Social Security record cleanup efforts comes as the Trump administration submitted an emergency petition to the U.S. Supreme Court earlier this month to allow access to Social Security data after lower courts blocked its access. In March, U.S. District Judge Hollander, who is based in Maryland, ruled that Doge could not access Social Security systems because such a move could run afoul of the Federal Privacy Act, also alleging that the task force's mission to root out fraud, waste, and abuse is a fishing expedition. She also directed the Doge team to delete any personally identifiable data that it may have in its possession. You would think that finding 12.3 million people that are marked as alive, that are supposedly 120 years or older, would be enough to say, you know what? You do have to go on a fishing expedition to find anything that doesn't look right in a system that's clearly been managed either badly deliberately or badly accidentally, but a system that's completely out of control, that a lot of people, of course, tens of millions of people at a minimum, depend on working properly. It's not working properly. The system is not supposed to be allowing people who clearly aren't alive to be marked as alive in the system, and it needs to be corrected. And even more so, of course, we have inspectors general. We have all kinds of mechanisms that are supposed to keep these things working properly. They have not been doing the job. So how else are you going to fix this thing unless the Doge guys go in and fix it? Eventually, we will see Doge team up with the Department of Justice. And Doge people inside the Department of Justice will specifically go and audit things. And maybe then we'll get some accountability for all this fraud. Quote, the Doge team is essentially engaged in a fishing expedition at the Social Security Administration in search of a fraud epidemic based on little more than suspicion. How about 12 million people that are clearly not alive marked as alive? That should be enough to say, you know what? There is something wrong there. Doge has launched a search for the proverbial needle in the haystack without any concrete knowledge that the needle is actually in the haystack, according to the judge. Out of Maryland, one district court judge deciding that the federal government does not need to be run with any kind of efficiency or accountability. A month later, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit issued a ruling to uphold Hollander's order, prompting the Trump administration to file its appeal with the Supreme Court. A court filing submitted by Solicitor General John Sauer, who really is a great attorney, he's doing a great job, he filed on May 13th, arguing that Hollander effectively superseded the executive branch and dictated which government employees can access the data and even prescribe necessary training, background checks, and paperwork for data access. We do have three separate but co-equal branches of government. The judicial branch is not really above the executive branch, nor is the executive branch above the judicial branch. They each have areas they're supposed to work in, and they're supposed to have deference to each other. Stopping the Trump administration is not deference. And that's what these federal district judges have been doing throughout the country. Sauer said this, quote, when district courts attempt to transform themselves into the human resources department for the executive branch, the irreparable harm to the government is clear, he wrote. Doge is not its own separate department. Doge is a resource agency for the federal government. Many Doge employees work directly inside each of the departments, and they work for those departments, not even for Doge. They do Doge functions, but they're not a part of Doge's direct agency. Doge's direct agency gives advice to the White House and gives advice to separate departments. There really is no legal legitimate way to say, oh no, whatever's going on at Social Security, we can't look at that. We have to let it just continue until the end of time, or until the end of Social Security, which probably will come before the end of time, especially if this obvious mismanagement and fraud is not fixed. The Doge team has been effectively led by tech billionaire Elon Musk, a senior advisor to Trump, and a special government employee up until recently, meaning that he has 130 days to complete his specific work. Musk said in a Tesla earnings call last month that he would be stepping back from his government duties in May to focus on his companies. And of course, Musk is doing that with his people in place left at Doge. On the credit card fraud story, Senator Joni Ernst recently talked about wasteful spending on government credit cards. And not wasteful in the sense of, oh, well, the government really didn't need this. Wasteful in the sense of, why are you charging UFC fights, bar tabs, and casino charges on federal government credit cards? That's not for the federal government. The federal government does not need to go to the casino. Joni Ernst said this, the federal government through GSA credit cards has 4.6 million active credit cards and accounts. We have a little less than half that number in federal employees, she says. She added that a lot of card usage occurs during federal holidays and on days like New Year's Eve at nightclubs, bars, and on Sunday afternoons, spending money at a big UFC fight or something pay-per-view. And there are also cash withdrawals at casino ATMs. When the federal government is doing cash withdrawals at casino ATMs, when they could easily be stealing from the Treasury because they don't really track payments, Now they do thanks to Doge. But obviously something is not right there. This Newsweek article has some explanations, but they're not good enough to cover cash withdrawals at casino ATMs. From Newsweek, Doge deactivates over 500,000 federal credit cards. Doge has suspended more than 500,000 federal credit cards in its ongoing effort to slash government spending. Doge announced that credit cards from 32 federal agencies have been deactivated as part of the initiative. With $40 billion in annual federal spending previously flowing through these credit cards, Doge's deactivation campaign aims to reduce non-essential expenses that can quietly add up across various departments. In a statement released on Wednesday on X, Doge said the number of cards suspended in their audit now passed 500,000, meaning a tenth of all government credit cards have been deactivated by Doge. So the federal government still has over 4.5 million active credit cards for less than 3 million employees. Doge said this, quote, the program to audit unused or unneeded credit cards has been expanded to 32 agencies. After 10 weeks, more than 500,000 cards have been deactivated, according to the statement. They also said, as a reminder, at the start of the audit, there were about 4.6 million active cards and accounts, so there's still more work to do. In way of an explanation for why the federal government needs millions of credit cards, Michael Ryan, founder of MichaelRyanMoney.com, previously told Newsweek that cutting access to federal credit cards is not without any risk, saying, quote, these aren't your typical consumer credit cards. We're looking at lifelines for federal agencies, cards that keep the lights on quite literally. Need to book a last-minute flight for a critical meeting? There's a card for that. Emergency maintenance part for a military vehicle? Yes, there's another card for that. Office supplies for a research lab working on something that could change the world? You guessed it, another card, he says. I certainly understand the idea of convenience. It's great to have extra credit cards around in case you really need something for work. But the way this situation is being described, it sounds like each credit card is a separate account. And there are so many credit cards that activity is a little bit difficult to track. I mean, in the millions. And with 32 different federal agencies issuing these credit cards, are we really sure that every federal agency in every department is really watching carefully how the money is being spent to make sure that nothing is being stolen from the federal government? It doesn't look that way. Maybe they could come up with some kind of a system to block ATMs at casinos and in Social Security. Do they really need to keep people over 110 years old on Social Security? I don't want to take anybody's payments away that deserves them. But maybe they could look into the universe of people who are still alive at age 110 or older, contact them, send somebody into the field if you need to, and see if they're still alive. Don't people have death certificates? Isn't there a way to reconcile this? Do I have to go to the federal government and do this for them? No, they've got Doge for that. And we've also not heard the end of the Treasury's federal payments that seem to have gone missing. $4.7 trillion. Not all of that was stolen. Was 5% of it stolen? Maybe 10%? 10% is $500 billion or so. That seems like a lot of money, and they need to figure all this out. What we really need is the Department of Justice working very closely with Doge to understand where has all of this money been going and who exactly is going to be held accountable.